This is Insight. Phone lines are open. Dial 384-2191.
It is a Friday here. It is the final Friday in the merry, merry month of May 2020. Time has flown by, whether you're stuck inside or even when you're out and about, so to speak here. It seems like the time is moving right along, and not a whole lot to base it off of, with most activities gone here in the summertime and being canceled because of the pandemic situation. This morning here on the final Friday of the month, well, I'm being double teamed. Yep. If you can see it on the video here, I normally would have Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker in here, and he's in here. Mm-hmm. And you brought your backup.
Yeah, I brought a good friend of mine, Rick Ramso, Police Chief, Marshfield.
Hey, what are you doing in here?
I
like hanging out with the radio guys?
I do. I know. You just you have a draw, I think. Surprised that there's not 15 people in here.
Yeah. Oh, they're outside waiting.
Yeah, with signs and pitchforks. So what's COVID been like for your department?
Interesting. Going through the last several weeks, one thing, and why Rick's here is, number one, we have a really good working relationship, and that was really put to test once the pandemic was felt in central Wisconsin and including Wood County. We as law enforcement had to work together. We had to come together immediately and decide, okay, what are our priorities? What can we do on a common ground and move forward with things, and we've been working together since this hit. And I really have to thank Rick for the support and the movement that we've been doing with law enforcement. All of our police chiefs, we've been getting together weekly as needed, just to discuss things as what our stance is going to be initially as the stay-at-home orders came out, and how we are going to move forward with that, and then continually move on once the Supreme Court came out with their decision, what we're going to do and continue working together and working with our health department and the people in Wood County. What was very important is that we felt as leaders is having that unified stance moving forward, because it wouldn't help anybody to do something different, and that's where that communication came down with all of us as leaders, and how important it was to get together and move forward, dealing with something that we've never dealt with before, in our lifetime. And it's been different, for the Sheriff's Department. We have a jail, and that's a big concern of all of ours, because it affects not just the Sheriff's Department, but every community within Wood County, and making adjustments there, because we have to look at the safety and security of the people in our jail, the inmates, and our corrections officers. And we have to do our best to try to keep people that have this virus out of the facility, because our facility is old. I talked about that. I don't know how many years, or I'm sorry, how many times I've been on here, but just the facility itself with airflow, it's not something that is newer. And we have to try to separate people that are coming to jail right now. It's not like the jail is closed. But as people come in, we have to keep them away from people that have been in custody for several months, just because they could be asymptomatic and we don't know it. So we got to keep them separated for at least 14 days. So part of our jail is basically separated from people that have been in custody for a while, and as they go through that time frame, then we'll work them in with other people within different parts of our jail. But that's been a big challenge, not just for the Sheriff's Department, but I know for the other law enforcement agencies, because we had to take a different approach on who is going to come in custody. And obviously domestic related crimes, felony matters, people are going to come to jail, and the jail is not closed. But I do have to thank our 3 judges for working with us, probation and parole with working with us, that lowered our inmate population, so we had enough room in case we'd have somebody that could or is affected with the virus, that we can have them separated for a time frame.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, and Marshfield Police Chief Rick Ramsey is also here. That was a question I had. I've been hearing on social media, what that's worth.
Gotta believe everything.
I know, but they're complaining, grandma's incarcerated in a nursing home, and yet we're letting people who are out of out of jail. So are we doing bracelets, house arrests, or how are we getting numbers down?
Well, we looked at a couple different things. One with the judges on bond modifications, people that were in custody for cash bonds that were nonviolent, were adjusted. They either got a signature bond or a lower cash bond, so they can move out of the jail and have a different court date later at some time. The other thing, like you brought up, we expanded our electronic monitoring program for those people that qualified. So you're talking nonviolent offenders, all right? So we really expanded that program. We average usually about 40 people in that program. Well, we have over 70 now. So that was a big help. I would say those two, adjustments were probably the biggest thing that we saw that we changed, and also probation and parole. Not utilizing jail for violations that people are on probation, like nonviolent violations. They weren't holding people accountable by using jail. They're doing other things. So those are probably the three biggest things that brought our inmate population down. And another thing too, warrants. Again, with our judges, and I know I talked about this before, just with certain warrants, like failure to pay warrants for a traffic matter or an ordinance, have all been stayed right now. So that gave us an opportunity to take a look at, all right, is that something we want to look at in the future? And I'd like to, work with our judges and our clerk of court's office to say these types of warrants, are those type of people that we want in custody? I say no, because they're ordinance and they're civil, forfeitures. If you get a citation, what we're looking for is a fine amount. You're going to pay a fine for making that mistake. What I've been finding out is that, we've been having fines out there that went to warrants that are, people were going and doing transports to get these folks if they're picked up in another county. And we really have to make this look, we got to look at that in a cost-effective way. We're taking somebody that, all right, we enter a warrant in our system. That takes time. And this is like I'm going towards a failure to pay type situation. And then, all right, somebody gets picked up, say, in Milwaukee County for a fine of, could be $10. Are we supposed to go down and get them, bring them back so they pay the $10? Or a fine of, a couple $100? The state, through the Department of Revenue, has a collections opportunity that a lot of people utilize. And I'd like to see us kind of go in that direction for these types of situations. Now, don't get me wrong, if somebody is arrested for like a disorderly conduct and they come to jail, they see the judge and the judge says, okay, instead of getting 5 or 10 days of jail, here's a fine, and pay the fine, and you don't have to do that time frame in jail. All right. Well, if that person never takes care of the fine, then that person should come to jail because they were arrested for a crime. What I'm really talking about are the civil forfeitures, traffic forfeitures, ordinances, things of that nature.
Well, if you don't incarcerate, or how do you put teeth in that then? I mean, otherwise they just throw them in the trash.
Well, that's a great question. Two ways. One, you can get your driver's license suspended, if you don't pay the fine. And two, it goes to collections. At some point, you most likely have to pay, because with the Department of Revenue and their collections, agency that they have, say you get a tax return, you can come off that, and then the money will come to the county or the municipality that ever had that.
You're
fine.
Mixing departments here. You know how hard that is, right?
Well,
So I mean,
yeah.
that's a legislative thing almost.
Well, it's not a perfect system, and not all people agree with me on it either, but I'm looking at our facility. We have a 132 bed facility. We're already housing how many out of county? Our contract is 100 beds out of county. So with what's happening with this virus and looking at our inmate population, we do have to look at ways we can lower that and still keep the community safe. All right. So, and that's what we've been doing with not just, the sheriff's department, it's with, the judges and a lot of other people, other law enforcement agencies, probation, parole. There's a lot of people that are working together to make that happen. And once this is all said and done, we're doing a jail study right now. We can't hide the fact that, our facility is old, where we have, we only have so many beds. We're way beyond that. once that jail study's back, it's going to show that, okay, you probably need a new facility. And if we can do during this time frame, take a look, okay, what size facility do we really need? And that'll give us a good indication, like, okay, maybe we don't need this 500-bed jail that's going to cost $100 million. And I think that this is just an opportunity. We can really take a look at our inmate population and safely, lower it and look at the big picture of what do we really need.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, you mentioned that Wood County Jail, 132 beds. How many of them can you actually use now under the pandemic rules?
Well, we could use all of them if we had to, but by DOC 350 standards, we need to, they like around 80% of your jail bed population you should be around. So for us, it's about 105. But that's a recommendation, so.
That has nothing to do with pandemic.
No. So, and what happened a few months ago, we were at 131. And we were we were negotiating with Waupaca County for more bed space. And then the unfortunate pandemic happened, and that made us, work, like I said, not just the sheriff's department, making decisions like, well, okay, you can be released. No, it's working with a lot of other people. So we got our jail bed down, our inmate population down. So right now we're around mid-60s, and we've been down into the 50s. But we're not the only facility like that. I mean, if you look at all throughout the state, it wasn't a reaction by just the Wood County Sheriff's Department or the Wood County criminal justice system. This has happened through the entire state, and even in the prisons. That the inmate population has gone down because of this.
Who came down with that? DOJ or Department of Health?
Everybody did. I mean, we have to, and like I said, with our facility, we have to look at trying to keep it segregated from people that are coming in to jail, and keeping them away from people that already been in jail, because we have to look at the safety of the inmates that have been in there and our staff, and utilizing that 14-day time frame. If somebody comes in and they're going to be in jail for a while, we got to keep them separated from other people.
And I think the big thing to mention on that, Jeff, is this pandemic obviously doesn't stop crimes from being committed and people from being victimized, and the worst thing you can do, like Sean said, is bring in somebody who may be COVID positive. You don't know it, potentially impact staff, which, I mean, staffing can sometimes be limited in a jail, and if you lose a good portion of your jail staffing, you're then having to backfill that potentially with deputies. Now you're taking deputies off the road, or having them work, potentially exhausting them in that sense. So, I mean, it can really be this domino effect, which would definitely not be in the best interest of the inmates, the employees, the county as a whole. Then we may have to backfill, we as local law enforcement may have to backfill the county to assist them on the north end of the county, because they're backfilling the jail because the jail's on self-quarantine. I mean, it just becomes this huge domino effect. The only other thing I'll go back to is when we were talking about that tax intercept program. The Wisconsin Department of Revenue actually works with local governments. I mean, it's called the Wisconsin Tax Intercept Program, to where you can actually, if taxpayers have debts that are owed to local government, maybe to a tribe, whether it's back property taxes, maybe it's back fines from OWI or whatever. If you don't pay those fines, rather than putting somebody in jail, you can garnish their taxes, and it's listed right in statute that that's an option that we have. Not everybody utilizes that option, but it's out there. And that way, I mean, that money is owed to that municipality or that county. Maybe they repaired a sidewalk because it was in disrepair and the person didn't have the money to pay it. Well, if you continue not paying it, I mean, it's going to be put on your property taxes and potentially be garnished from, your Wisconsin income taxes. So, I mean, there's ways to collect that money. It's not foolproof, but it's an option out there.
You mentioned the tribe. Now that's sovereign, so they've got their own force there, but that's also under the Wisconsin state regulations.
Correct.
I mean, when you say you didn't pay your fines on the reservation for whatever not gambling debts.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what those debts are. I mean, but yeah, I mean, tribes are listed in there under the statute with so they have the ability to utilize the tax intercept program as well. You wouldn't want to say that they can't because they're sovereign. That opens up the door to give them a resource or a tool to be able to collect debts that are maybe owed on those tribal lands.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker on this final Friday in the month of May. How have you, changed anything with the being limited in jail space? Are you in constant contact with whether or not there's room to take somebody before you pick them up, or is it just hold them here in the cell, or how does that work?
No, we've worked, like Sean said, we've worked hand in hand with the Sheriff's Department. They've done a very good job communicating with all Wood County law enforcement agencies, but they put a standard in place. We complied with what that standard was. What will be accepted into jail, what will not, what needs medical clearance based on certain ailments somebody may have. And it's really allowed us to an extent. I mean, there's individuals who we believe should go to jail, and I think that Sean would say the same thing, that normally we would send this person to jail to see the judge in the next morning, at the very least, to get the ball rolling in that sense. Those situations are just being referred and the person is being released. Obviously not people who are a danger to other persons, not significant or severe felonies, even if there are severe property crimes, we're still holding them accountable. If they're domestic related, like I said, crimes against person. So those are the no-brainers of needing to go to jail. It's just, the warrants. It's the, if we stop somebody for a criminal offense of no valid DL and or operating after revocation, and they can't post a bond, and they don't have any local ties, and they're not employed, and they're not from the area, oftentimes just for that accountability's sake, so that they would at least have to sign a signature bond the next day or do something like that, we would take them to jail. We kind of go through this screening form. And if they fail the screening form, then they go to jail or they have to post bond. So in those instances, I mean, it's caused us to have to travel to Rapids fewer times, but it's still, I would say probably about half. We've probably half to maybe 60% of those that we would normally take to jail, we haven't.
Do you or the judge make a determination on flight risk?
Both. I mean, we initially do. If we feel that somebody, through this, we have a misdemeanor bond screening form. Normally, any felony that we have, that would be either a property crime or, a drug offense, which might be considered a victimless crime, or a crime against a person. I mean, most felonies would go to jail. Most. If it's a misdemeanor and we go through the screening form. The screening form says, has this person failed to show up for court in the past? Have there been warrants out for this person before? Do they have any ties to the community? Do we have any reason to believe that they will show up for court? The whole thing is, we don't want these warrants hanging out there. I mean, we have warrants going back to the, early 80s, and we've found the people, but, they're in California or down in Florida or in New York, and, are we really going to, like Sean said, expend the resources to get this person and hold them accountable for, back in 87, they stole a TV from a store, and, well, probably not, because TVs weighed about 500 pounds back then, but, they maybe committed a theft of $500, and they need to be, this is now a 40-year-old warrant. We're going to spend well over $500 to bring them back here to try to, clean this up. So, I mean, in those cases, you don't want those warrants hanging out there in limbo forever, but there still needs to be some level of accountability. So, we go through this form, and if they are a flight risk or a risk of not showing up for court and doing the right thing, then we have them post a bond, $250, $500. We kind of just go through the bond book that the state of Wisconsin puts out. And if they are unable to post that bond or find somebody to post that bond for them, is when we would normally take them to jail. That's misdemeanors. Then a judge may make that decision to put a signature bond if they're not a flight risk, or a cash bond if they are a flight risk, or no bond if it's a severe enough or significant enough offense. But so, I mean, there's two different levels. One is the immediate contact, and one is the contact based on what the judge perceives as a threat to the community.
Talking with Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza, along with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker here on today's Insight program, this final Friday of the month. You know that if you're listening live. Otherwise, if you're watching us on video, you kind of, in this fast-changing times, I never know what to say, because by the time the show is over, things could change. We live in just that kind of a world here now where legislation comes down and all of a sudden, hey, we're open again. How did that affect you guys? When all of a sudden, okay, it's 5 o'clock and we can go turn the keys on the bar and open it up now.
Well, a few of the taverns throughout the county opened up, and they were waiting to do that for quite some time. I know Rick got a lot of calls, I did too, and yeah, once the decision came down from the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you had people immediately going out and opening up. There was some concern with us, with law enforcement, like, okay, now what are we in for? But there were very, very limited low calls of service when that happened. So which is a great thing for everybody. But the Supreme Court decision, for us gave it a clear, role, what our role is for law enforcement, all right? Because before that, we had that enforcement role. And with everything kind of in limbo, but it's like, okay, here's the stay-at-home orders, all right? Now you guys go out and enforce them. And there wasn't, a heck of a lot of communication from, up from the governor all the way down to the level of us. It's like, okay, here it is. There wasn't like, okay, what are your thoughts? What do you suggest? What area that you work in? What would be best for you? It was like, and that was frustrating, for all of us to move forward. And one thing I'll say, during the stay-at-home orders, the voluntary compliance was outstanding. We did not have many issues at all during that time frame. You could see it building up, the longer it went on. That's why I was very fortunate that we had some clear direction with the Supreme Court. But before that, our folks here in Wood County, and I think in central Wisconsin, really complied, communicating with the other sheriffs and chiefs of police. We had some really good volunteer compliance, but the way things were building up, we knew that how long was that going to last? So that gave, law enforcement, all right, here's really where we're at. Now, the CDC, our health department are going to put out information with the guidelines and recommendations on what to do, and we're going to move forward. Now, that could change. It really could, because remember, there's still a virus out there. It's dangerous, all right? People are dying from it. People are getting sick from it, so there's still a virus out there. But for law enforcement, our role now has been clearly, designated as, if you want to look at it that way, or our role, we know it now. So again, but the biggest thing I have to say is, number one, the working relationship we have with all of our law enforcement partners made it a lot easier to move through this. And even more so, the voluntary compliance of our community was huge. It made our job a lot easier. Granted, we had a lot of questions along the way. Bottom line, we did, but we're getting through it.
I think one of the best things that could have happened, and we did it, and Sean was a part of it. Not only did Sean host the Wood County law enforcement department heads, to make sure we were all on the same page and in agreement on things, or at least understood where each other stood. So we had that unified front, but we also, as a city, Jay Schrader from the clinic, Marshfield Clinic Health Systems, myself, and many other city leaders. We had Mackie there, we had Sean there, we had the YMCA, we had Main Street Marshfield, we had United Way, the school district. We had both Ryan Christensen from Marshfield, the school district of Marshfield. We had Lori Whelan from Columbus. We had Christy Roderig from Wood County Health Department. I mean, in all, I think we had anywhere from 15 to 20 individuals. First, it was twice a week, and then it was once a week. Currently, it's once a week, but we're still maintaining that, collaborating and meeting to discuss kind of just on a roundtable fashion what's happening, what's going on in our own worlds, what do we need to share out with not only those that we work with, but those that we interact with on a weekly, daily basis, and just to, I guess, champion the cause so that we do have that voluntary compliance. I mean, once we get Mackey and Main Street and United Way on board with sharing with those organizations or groups or businesses that they work with the importance of complying with this and trying to meet those needs. I don't know that without this group that quasi-stimulus money from Economic Development Board maybe wouldn't have come to fruition. The mayor came up with that great idea. He was part of these conversations. The city administrator was. Without a lot of this collaboration, knowing what's happening at the Marshfield Clinic, knowing what's happening, on from the fire department and what they're seeing and the protective steps that they're taking, their asks, the businesses' asks, it was just able to really kind of have that complete transparency of not only what the community is dealing with, but what we're dealing with to try to serve the community in our own ways. And we've even had conversations about when COVID, is really no longer a daily word. We should still meet as a collective body to make sure that the health and safety of our community is on the forefront, and we're doing what we need to do to keep the community safe and keep ourselves safe and know what each other is doing and working with. And that way we can, again, be that unified front, not only between officers or between firefighters or between city government officials, but really just a more open dialogue and communication continually.
Marshfield Police Chief Rick Ramsey, along with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker here at 384-2191 on the Insight program if you'd like to ask a question here. Chief mentioned law enforcement agencies are in the county. Now, other than the cities and the sheriff, are there constables in this county? Are there individual township?
Some have them, but their roles are mainly to enforce ordinance violations, animal control violations, things of that nature. I know we've gone in a contract with the Village of Vesper, but some do have them. They're limited. Not many people are out there. But I want to go back to what Rick just brought up. The city of Marshfield, I'm extremely impressed with the communication of that conference call. It is extremely informative. Of everybody's got something to bring to the table of what's going on with whatever leadership role they have. It brings a lot of confidence that people are working together. When you see what's going on, in our country, where it's not working, it is really working in Marshfield, and having those conference calls and just hearing the confidence in each other. I'm very, very fortunate that we are asked to be part of that, and just hearing just the different things that are going on within the city and how people are communicating and working together. That's a true testament to the leadership and the people that are in not only elected positions but in appointed positions, working together under really different circumstances. Something like I mentioned before, we've never gone through this before, and to just see people step up, working together for the common good of the community is it's a great thing to see, because you just compare it to other tragedies and how people are reacting to those. I don't see that happening here, just the way people working together.
He's Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker. When you talk about that, the more people from law enforcement to healthcare you have on the table, somebody will bring up something I never thought of that.
Exactly. I mean, we don't come from the medical side of things. We're not doctors. We're not nurses, or we're not in that profession. We're not lawyers. But more people that we're not business owners. But the more people you have at the table, the more you're going to learn, and that comes from all different directions.
Have they given you any guidance on between masking up as deputies or as the jail?
Yes. For law enforcement, it really came down to each department, each law enforcement agency. It was up to that agency. Some did, some did not. The sheriff's department left it up to each individual officer or corrections officer, whether or not they wanted to. In the jail, we provided more protection. We had respirators back there that we got through a donation, which was great. And that's another thing, I have to mention that, in the beginning of this, we did not have the protective gear. And it's like, okay, and now we can't get it. And that's where we had our community folks come together and say, here. We had a couple times where just coming up to squad car, I remember one case in Pittsville said, hey, I've got stuff for you. I've been looking for, one of your deputies to give this to you. Just we know you need it. And then, a couple of businesses coming through.
What was it?
A bunch of N95 masks.
Oh, really?
And then hand sanitizer. Says,
where do people come up with this stuff if you can't get it?
Well, well, if you go back, a lot of the construction folks, they have a stockpile of it. And, it didn't matter what they did. They had it and they gave it to us. We're catching up now. We have caught up now, but for that first 4, 5, 6 weeks, we're like, okay, but having people in the community come up and, hey, we're concerned about your safety. Here, take it. Which was just outstanding.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, Marshfield PD Chief Rick Ramza is here also to take your questions. 384-2191, 384-2191, live on WDLB Radio this final Friday of the month of May. Or you could be watching us on video here, channel 989 on your Spectrum Digital tier. It will be rotating throughout the month. But surprised to see you both in here. But again, it was probably to let people know about the collaboration and cooperation that's gone on here for not only this special time that we're in, but in general as well.
Yeah, we've had a great working relationship throughout the years. We started our careers around the same time. I'm a little older, I'll admit that, but not by much. But then we had talked about that after the change at the Sheriff's Department, getting the opportunity to come on together and just talk about the careers and how they mirrored each other and where we're at now. It's gone by very, very fast, to say the least. To say that we're at this point in both of our careers where I can go back into the late 90s and we're both on the road working traffic together. It's just it's amazing how life seems to go on fast forward the older you get.
You talk about the age and the time period. You had a situation in the city of someone being dismissed for lack of physical abilities. Can you comment on that? Is that still in?
It's still in the grievance process, so we're really not discussing that right now.
Do you have anything on the Wood County that is similar to that, where you have to meet certain physical fitness requirements?
Yeah, for our special response team, we do. We have something similar to that as far as something overall for non-specialized positions. We don't at this time, but we do for any new applicant and that's a new process that we started last year. So any new law enforcement applicant that wants to work at the Sheriff's Department has to go through a physical fitness test. And what we take is the state standards for the Law Enforcement Academy, and with that, the state standards, there is a beginning when you enter the academy to where you end the academy, and we felt it was fair to use the standards of coming into the academy. And we've had a couple folks not pass it, and we just felt that the physical fitness is an important part of law enforcement, and felt that's where we're going to implement it on the folks that are new and want to get into law enforcement. And the state's doing it. We felt that it was important to do at that time.
Is that a good forever? Like once you pass, you don't have to ever take it again, or do you?
Right now, yeah.
Okay. So that you don't have like every fourth year or something, or every.
No, but our SWAT team, our special response team, every year is expected to pass, and we've been doing that for several years.
That's because of the dangerousness of the situation?
It's a different level of law enforcement. It's very stressful, strenuous. I mean, you're carrying a lot of equipment. It's not just, what you see on normal law enforcement officer's belt or a vest. I mean, you're carrying a heavy vest. You're carrying equipment. You're carrying a ram. You're carrying, different law enforcement equipment, and you have to under extremely stressful times, and those types of fitness tests have been out for ever. I think almost every law enforcement agency that has a special response team has some sort of fitness standards that they, require you to pass. And it's a good, check all too when you get that point in your career. For myself, I loved being on the team. That was probably one of the hardest things for me to step away from. Was when I became an administrator, I had to step away from our special response team. I just really loved being part of that. But for other folks, as you get older in your career, it makes you really think, like, this is probably a position, being on a SWAT team, I should give somebody younger the opportunity to. Granted, my skills are probably there, but I'm not 20 years old anymore. I'm not 30 years old. I'm 50. And that might be give somebody else an opportunity to be part of.
Is that a thinking man's game or a young man's game here, whereas physical fitness is more important?
It's both. Because if you look at law enforcement, being in shape is very important, but you're making decisions every day of your shift that affects other people. So being, it's a very, very, it's a thinking man's game, but you still have to have the ability to do the job as well.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker and Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here on today's Insight program. You can join us 384-2191, 384-2191 on today's program this final Friday in May. AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program coming to you this final Friday in the month of May. You know that if you're listening live on radio, you could be watching us in video here, channel 989 on your digital spectrum tier, or you could watch us at marshfieldmediaaccess.org, as well as we talk with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker, and also joined by Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here to talk about what's happening around the county, and I guess to show a solidarity.
You betcha. It wasn't always like that, was it?
No, it was always, there was challenges. Early in our careers, there was challenges. There was always a divide. It was like the north side, north
Has
north
Wood
end of the
always
county.
been the Hatfields and McCoys?
And I don't even know. Well, maybe it was that bad. But there was always that north-south divide.
Were you guys on board for the dispatch change?
Boy, that was how many years ago was that?
14? 12?
Yeah, where I was at in my career, the effect wasn't really on me. I wasn't an administrator at the time, and looking at it from both sides, I could see where it'd be nice to keep dispatch at least separated, but the effect on me, it wasn't big. I couldn't understand, like coming from Marshfield. Well, no, we want to keep it, but when you combine resources and looking into saving some money, you understand the way it's going now. They're finally in a nice location in the courthouse. I have no complaints. I don't. It's separated from the sheriff's department. Now it's part of it, so we're not under control of the dispatch center. But however, the people in the leadership there we work with very well. It's working, so I can't complain as an administrator now that we need to separate.
So was that a department unto itself, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The dispatch center?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we, I, as an officer or a detective at the time with Marshfield, I don't think anyone, from the patrol side of things really wanted to see it go, because it almost felt like we were, I wouldn't say a control issue, but we were just losing, the intimacy of having somebody who knows our community, who lives in our community, can direct us in calls for service or in crisis, and just having that in-house resource was really invaluable. I think it's the combined dispatch or the countywide dispatch has gone better than I think maybe many of us thought it would. It's you can point flaws and to it if you're truly looking for them, but our system of our own in-house dispatch wasn't perfect either, but no, it's gone well. They've served us well. It makes sense especially when you're a taxpayer paying City of Marshfield taxes, but yet still paying Wood County taxes. It's almost as though you're double paying for some of those services. Same thing with, you just, so then it's like, okay, well, and especially in Rapids, when you had Wisconsin Rapids and Wood County Sheriff's Department having their own dispatch, and they're, a quarter mile away from each other, half mile away from each other, we were able to reduce the amount of people needed, and have a better sharing of resources, which is always the goal when you're talking. I mean, we've had conversations over a combined SWAT team. Right now, Marshfield has a SWAT team, Wood County has a SWAT team, Wisconsin Rapids has a SWAT team. Does it make sense to do a combined countywide SWAT team to where we're pooling resources, pooling personnel, pooling training, just sharing those things. And then really if, we have 7 entry members on our SWAT team and we have 2 snipers. Well, if a situation plays out to where Wood County says, hey, we need 4 snipers and they only have 2 on hand, we could send our 2 down, or Rapids could send their 2 over. If a significant situation happens at Marshfield Clinic, our 7 entry members for SWAT aren't going to be able to handle the Marshfield Clinic as a whole as far as the building goes. We're already going to be relying on the county to come. We're probably going to be relying on Marathon County and maybe even Clark County to come and assist us in a situation like that. Well, why not, again, pool those resources to the best of our ability, make the best use of those taxpayer dollars, train together, learn from one another, and just provide the best service outwardly as we can.
Yeah.
As I recall, there was a contention with was it other than the Sheriff's Department, whereby there was an emergency response team that would only serve southern Wood County, but all of Wood County was paying for it, or something along that line, whereby that
I don't recall some situation that we only would service a smaller part of it.
No, but it wasn't that you weren't responding. It's just that it didn't, the amount of time it took to get here, they'd already had it handled.
Yeah. Well, that depends. I mean, with our special response team, the members on it live all over the county. And in fact, a good handful of them live, in the northern part of the county. So, with, the conversations that we've been having for a while about combining a team just really makes sense. And it's not something that any one of us came up with this idea. It's a lot of other counties do it too as well. And Rick's exactly right. You have 3 teams in the county. It kind of makes sense to at least combine them. Because if you have an incident, it could be in Marshfield, it could be in Pittsfield, it could be in Wisconsin Rapids. You have so many different people to pull from to get, what you need there for resources. And if that incident keeps building and it's taking longer to deal with, then you've got more of your own folks to come in and help out with it. And then even, going further than that, you've got other teams like Marathon County and Portage County that you can rely on. But it's just one of those resources that you look at going back to dispatch. What do the taxpayers get the best, best bang for their buck? And when you can get the opportunity to combine resources, and what's important and really to note is the concept of working together. It only makes sense. We don't have to agree on every single thing, but working together and what's the common good for everybody is very important. If there is a difference, you put it aside and you work together. And that's the relationship that we've built on for many, many years. Was it always like that? No. I remember situations where leadership didn't always see eye to eye. And I always, wondered why. I mean, we're on the same team. It doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing. We're on the same team, and the community should expect that we work together. If there is a call in Marshfield and all the officers are tied up and there's a deputy available, by all means, we're going to help you out. Or if, hey, can you take calls for us for an hour? Sure. Or if there's an, issue that, we're tied up out in the county, hey, can you send a Marshfield car? That relationship is there.
Is that a mutual aid pact, or is that just a handshake?
Mutual aid. Yeah, it really boils down to mutual aid, and you can call it a handshake because, we get along. But it's automatic, and it wasn't always, like I said, if you go back to the beginning of our careers, and not saying anything that our leadership was poor from either one of our agencies, it was just a different attitude that you saw. And I think as time went on, and the attitude for us working together really transferred into leadership, and it just, you can tell it's a difference.
You have kind of led into something here that is on a lot of people's minds today, with unemployment being, I heard today, like 1 in 4 people. I'm like, holy moly, I can't believe it. As I look around, you mean every one of you 4 doesn't have a place to go today? You're looking depression era. They start throwing these facts out, and I'm like, wow. So in the staffing of your organizations, I know you're under a different, it's money that's there because it's already there, and it's not like a private agency where you ebb and flow. But have you had any cutbacks? Are you adding? Are you cutting? Or what are you doing?
I guess as far as our agency goes, there's been minor cutbacks, partially due to the pandemics and for health reasons, but then also, for, I think it's just natural. Our adult school crossing guards, we haven't, they've been
furloughed, or
more or less furloughed, or they were laid off since school wasn't in session. Now, summer school is not in session, where we would normally use a couple of them, and they won't be needed. But hopefully at the start of the school year in the fall, we'll be able to bring them back, and if school's in session and everything. We have a transport officer program where normally, just so we don't drop below minimum staffing, we call somebody in to transport somebody down to jail. We've been just not using them, again, for safety reasons, but also for financial reasons, and have just been making the best use of the staff that we have working.
Well, no Hub City, no Dairy Fest, auxiliary police. You must be saving something.
Well, yeah, auxiliary are volunteers, so they're not paid for any of their services. But they're still, we've started, having them come and assist us for some things, like they'll be assisting us this weekend when the high school, senior high, is doing a graduation procession, and we just need some traffic direction. So, a lot of the overtime that we would potentially be putting out, or maybe a little more loose with, if we're doing, the traffic grants weren't happening, and because the amount of traffic out there wasn't such. So, there has been a cost savings to an extent, but we still needed our humane officers, because we still had garbage complaints, parking complaints, animal complaints. We still needed our secretaries, because we were still working with them through, there's still calls for service, and really, based on our staffing, we don't have an overabundance of officers. We have the appropriate number of officers. We augmented their schedule, but we really didn't need to lay any of them off, and I think that would have put the city in a compromising situation if we would have had to.
For people that are on the road, it must have been, wow, barren out here compared to what we normally have, I would imagine. The bars were closed, but they're doing land office business at the convenience store and a grocery store. So I don't know, DUI down or traffic?
No, we've had I would say probably about the same. Our calls to service are down. But we've seen, drunk driving arrests out there, drug arrests, domestics. Like I had mentioned earlier, the jail, the doors aren't closed.
Do they stick out a little more? When you have somebody who's doing, comings and goings at a neighbor's house, and they're doing, things that, that's not right. It must stick out a little more than when there was traffic and people around. And like I said, opioid abuse doesn't go away because there's a pandemic. They're still jonesing for their fix, so to speak. But I don't know if they stick out more.
I don't know. I guess it depends. You had more people at home, so you had more people maybe observing what was going on in their neighborhood during hours that they normally wouldn't be at home. But unfortunately, I guess to an extent, maybe some child abuse, complaints have gone down, because school's not in session, and oftentimes it's the teachers, or it's school aides, or it's a bus driver, or somebody else who has an interaction with the child that learns of something. So, those numbers have gone down. It doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means maybe it's not being reported as often because those mandatory reporters who are not related, by blood to the family, aren't interacting with the children. We'd love to think it's not happening as often, but we can't say that. We just know that interaction isn't happening. Numbers go down during the summer as well for that. And not saying that they're all validated investigations, but there's still investigations that we get involved with.
Yeah. And our part-time staffing is gone down quite a bit, obviously, too, because, we have our part-time deputy program that a lot of that work special events. A lot of people would contact us if it's for Auburndale Music Fest or a wedding at a certain town hall. So quite a bit of that is obviously been put aside. Our parks are still open, so our part-time deputies are still patrolling the parks. But with the large-scale events continually being canceled, that program obviously is getting scaled back. And I mentioned it before, transports. We do have a good handful of people that are part-time transport officers that, we're not doing many transports anymore. They're very limited.
You're talking from jail to jails.
Correct, yeah. It's very limited right now. Again, we're probably going to Apaka in Adams County, who we contract with, but it's limited. So we obviously scaled that back. So we've seen a larger impact on our part-time staff than anything, which is to be expected just based on what's going on. And the more and more of these larger scale events that get canceled, they're going to be utilized less and less, and we're not going to be putting full-time deputies on those types of events because they're not happening. So that's going to, as we move forward, you'll see that effect where we won't be spending as much money in those types of situations.
Talking with Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker and Marshfield Police Chief Rick Gramza here on today's Insight program on AM 1450 WDLB. WDLB's Insight program here for this final Friday in the month of May, coming to you live. You know that if you're listening on radio, but you could be watching us on video, Marshfield Media Access, and also on Channel 989, your Charter, your Spectrum Digital tier. Police Chief Rick Gramza, along with Sean Becker, Wood County Sheriff, joining us this morning. Glad to see you guys.
Yeah, great to be here.
I was a little intimidated when you both came in at the same time. I thought this.
Why?
Yeah, usually it means you have something to hide.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, okay. It's easy there, detective.
We'll talk off. Yeah, off radio, we'll talk.
Yeah. I hope not. Maybe with a social situation here. All right, we'll say goodbye for now. I'm Jeff Cannon with you, so stay with us.
Your hometown radio station.